Well, good morning, everyone. How are you doing this morning? And happy Father's Day to all you fathers. I sure wish I could be with my father today. He was a special, wonderful person, but and he would be dismayed at the world today, probably. Um, so this morning I'm getting ready to drive to Kingsville, and we are going to have in-person worship for the first time in 3 months. I can't believe it's been 3 months. But we are, and of course we're having to be very careful. Everybody has to wear a mask, and we can't gather in the narthex. There can be no passing the peace, no hugging, no singing, and very little congregational response. And we have to have these little individual sterilized communion kits for everybody as we celebrate communion today. So I'm a little apprehensive, but excited at the same time, and I know that the congregation is so excited about being able to see each other for the first time, for some of them, for the first time in a while. So it's kind of interesting too. The passage today is a little bit of a difficult one. It's from Matthew, and it's the place where Jesus is preparing the disciples for their task and their calling ahead. And we've talked about this for several weeks, but today we get into the part where he says that he didn't come to bring peace, but he brings a sword, and that mothers and fathers and mother children and parents will be separated, and they have to be prepared, to put everything else aside in order to follow this calling that's been placed on them. And the reason it's a difficult passage is that sometimes it gets used, like so many passages, it gets used to justify things like violence, and then also it gets looked at sort of as a kind of a cultish thing. But we need to understand the context, like we always do, of what was going on at the time and what the early hearers of these words would have understood. And part of the thing was that in that culture, it was an honor-shame culture, and I think I've said this in these last 3 months, that the honor was, you were either born with a certain amount of honor or you acquired it, but it was always in a public view, in a community context. These were not individualized souls necessarily. I mean, that it wasn't like it is for us, where we find our own way, we have our own way, and so much about our life is about us individually. But the people of the ancient Mediterranean culture were a communal people, and everything that happened in what we read in Scripture, we need to filter it through that communal context. So when they're talking about leaving their family of origin, that is scandalous, because that's how society was organized. You were organized in your family, tribal, so to speak, and daughters would leave their families and marry into their husband's family. So everything was oriented around the family. And so what Jesus was saying is that he was breaking boundaries, because the kind of community he was calling the disciples to and calling the followers to was a very inclusive community. He crossed boundaries, and whether it was the Samaritans or the lepers, he was always reaching on the outside and bringing them in. So anyone that wanted to be a part of this community, a part of this movement, had to understand that boundaries would be crossed. And in that culture, if you crossed boundaries, if you went outside your family, or you shared the table with someone who was considered unclean, that would have been a no-no. And in some situations, it would have been dangerous. And so you're risking everything, especially if you had more honor. For you to cross a boundary would be scandalous. And so what he's saying to them is not, don't love your family, but this inclusive community that you're being called to, it's going to cost you. So don't expect it to be easy. So from the very, very beginning, our calling to faith is one that is going to cost us, and it's going to cause us risk. And if we are, the more we lean into the teachings of Christ, the more we realize that that's what's counter to the system of the world even today. The system of the world today is about power and money, and whoever has the most money has the most power. And it's a system that's been set up for hundreds of years. And so what we're discovering today is that not everyone has had a place at the table. And it's time for those of us that have had a place at the table always and didn't always understand the differences and why there wasn't a place for everybody, or weren't even conscious of it because we were just enjoying our place at the table, that now it is time for us to be sure and stand up and say everyone needs a place at the table. I for some reason, when I woke up this morning, I was thinking about high school and how we all had our tables that we sat at, and the people that we sat at the table with. And we might be friends with other people, but we didn't always have table fellowship together. And how funny that is, because I can't even remember who all I sat at the table with, but through the years I've connected with people that I didn't know that well in high school, and that's been really fun. And I think, gee, I missed out by not moving around and sitting at more tables, or branching out more. And I just think that's what we're constantly called to, is to be expanding our awareness of who's not at the table and who's at the table, and make our lives one of invitation for everyone. I guess one last thing, because I'm a little scattered this morning because I've got to get on the road, but there's also something going on in the Presbyterian Church right now, and I don't know all of the details, but there's a seminary in California that it's all over, a seminary merging with another school, and one of the decisions to be made is, can they still celebrate communion as Presbyterians? And I thought to myself this morning, I don't know the details. I'm sure there's logic on both sides, but it all seems so ridiculous. It's like for 2,000 years we're still arguing over table fellowship, when Jesus very clearly invited everyone to the table. So that's my food for thought today that I'm chewing on, and I thought maybe you might want to chew on it too. Just what table are you a part of today that could be expanded? What areas in your world, in your circle of influence? It's the small things that we'll do in our own lives, in the context of our own influence, that will make a difference. You know, we can't all go out and run for Congress, or we can't all go out and bring forth marches and policies, but we can all do what we can do in our own lives to expand the table and to make sure everyone has a place. God bless you, and I hope you have a great day today.